This is Ask a Couples Counselor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. On the show, we'll take your questions and give you the tools you need to build trust and intimacy with your partner. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor. I'm a registered clinical counsellor and psychotherapist, and I'm really passionate about helping couples navigate the challenges that we all go through. Because after all, every relationship encounters some stormy weather now and then. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask a Couples Counselor. Today, we're diving into a topic that I see all the time in couples therapy: how our sexual dynamics can create challenges in relationships. And, more importantly, how these challenges can actually become opportunities for deeper connection and growth. Sexual satisfaction is such an intimate part of a relationship, yet it's also an area where many couples struggle to communicate openly. Whether it's navigating mismatched timing, physical discomfort, or feeling of guilt about not meeting each other's expectations, these experiences can bring up so much vulnerability. But here's the truth. These issues aren't just obstacles. They're invitations to work together as a team, to learn more about each other and to grow closer through the process. In this episode, we're exploring how to approach these challenges with curiosity, compassion, and practical solutions that help both partners feel seen, heard, and satisfied. No matter where you are in your own relationship, these conversations can transform the way you think about intimacy. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's get into our first question for today, which comes from Angie in Cairns. Let's have a listen to Angie's question.
I enjoy having sex with my partner, but they climax too fast, which can make it really unsatisfying for me, and I don't want to make them please me. So how can we work together to overcome this and be mutually satisfied?
This is such an important question, Angie, and I appreciate how open you've been about your experience. Look, sexual satisfaction is a shared experience, and it's really insightful that you're already framing this as something you want to work on together. That's a great starting point. So what you're describing, your partner climaxing more quickly than you'd prefer, is a very common dynamic in relationships. It's not about blame or inadequacy, but about understanding each other's rhythms and needs. So let's unpack this gently and constructively. So firstly, what I'd like to say is, and I always say this, that communication is key. So while it might feel uncomfortable at first, having an open and kind conversation with your partner is crucial. So you don't have to frame this as a problem, but rather as an opportunity to grow together. So say, for example, you might say something like, "Honey, I love being intimate with you, and I want us both to feel as satisfied as possible. Can we explore ways to make things last longer and feel even better for both of us? What are your thoughts around that?" Now, this approach focuses on mutual pleasure, and it avoids making your partner feel defensive. The other thing that I would like to say is there are many ways to enjoy intimacy that don't focus solely on penetration or climax. So you could experiment with activities that prolong arousal, like foreplay, mutual stimulation, or incorporating pauses during sex to slow things down. So sometimes focusing less on getting to the finish line and more on the journey can be a game changer. And some couples also find that trying different positions or creating space for your pleasure first, example through oral or mutual stimulation, can help balance things out. So if your partner climaxes early, exploring other ways they can pleasure you afterwards can still keep the connection alive without adding pressure. The other thing that I would like to say is if it's a physical issue, explore solutions together. Because premature climaxing, if that's what's happening, can often be addressed with some simple techniques or support. So for instance, your partner can practice edging during solo time. So this is learning to recognize when they're approaching climax and controlling it better. Then they can also use certain products like delay sprays or thicker condoms that can help reduce sensitivity. And they can also practice regular pelvic exercises to strengthen their control. If this has been a long-term concern, they might also benefit from consulting a doctor or a sex therapist to address any underlying factors like anxiety or medical issues. And finally, what I would say is focus on connection over perfection. And what I mean by this is that it's easy to feel like you're navigating this alone when your needs aren't fully met. However, sexual satisfaction in a relationship is a team effort. So, working together to build intimacy, both emotionally and physically, can deepen your connection and make sex more fulfilling for both of you. This isn't about making them please you, but about learning what works for each other and creating a space where both of your needs are met in a way that feels natural, exciting, and satisfying. And ultimately, your pleasure matters just as much as theirs, and navigating this with compassion and curiosity can make your relationship even stronger. I hope that answers your question, Angie. All right, let's get into our second question for today, which comes from Jenna in Adelaide. Let's have a listen to Jenna's question.
It takes a really long time for my partner to finish when we're having sex. Often we stop before they're done because of how long it takes, and I feel really guilty about it even though they say it's fine. What advice do you have for handling this?
It sounds like this is a situation that's been sitting heavily on your mind, Jenna. First of all, let me say that it's clear that you care deeply about your partner and their experience, which says so much about the kind of connection that you both have. But let's talk about this feeling of guilt, because it's important to unpack it and find a way forward that works for both of you. Now, when a partner takes longer to finish during sex, it can sometimes stir up feelings of self doubt or worry. Things like, am I doing enough? Or, are they really okay with this? These thoughts can make you feel pressured, even though your partner has already reassured you that they're fine. Now, what I'd want to explore with you is shifting the focus from the end goal of climax to shared intimacy and pleasure of the experience itself. Look, sex doesn't need to have a perfect ending every time to be fulfilling. In fact, it's often the connection, playfulness, and mutual enjoyment that matters most. So, if your partner is truly fine with how things are unfolding, it's okay to trust them when they say that. And sometimes the pressure we put on ourselves to make sex perfect can rob us of the joy that comes from just being in the moment. That said, I also want to say it's okay to discuss this openly with your partner if it's something you'd like to navigate together. You might say something like, look, honey, I love being close to you, but sometimes I feel guilty when we stop before you're done. How do you feel about it? Is there anything we could do differently? This creates a space where you can both express your feelings without judgment or pressure. And it's also worth noting that taking longer to climax can be influenced by a number of factors, like stress, medications, or even their level of comfort in the moment. Now, these aren't necessarily problems to solve, but they might be areas to explore if your partner feels the need. And if this is something they'd like to work on, there are techniques such as focusing on arousal or shifting mental attention that might help. But if they're genuinely content with how things are, that's okay too. Lastly, let's talk about your role in this. Because look, guilt can sometimes creep in when we feel like we're not doing enough. But sex is a shared experience. So it's not all on you to ensure your partner finishes. Trust in the bond that you have and try to let go of that guilt. Focus on what feels good for both of you and lean into that connection that you're building together. You're doing a beautiful thing by caring and wanting to handle this thoughtfully, Jenna. So at the end of the day, intimacy is about mutual understanding, trust, and pleasure, not just a specific outcome. So it sounds like your partner already values that connection. And now it's time for you to embrace it too. I hope that answers your question, Jenna. All right, let's get into our last question for today, which comes from an anonymous listener. Let's have a listen to their question.
Is it possible to have a fulfilling sexual relationship with someone who finds penetration painful?
Absolutely. It is possible to have a deep, fulfilling sexual relationship with someone who experiences pain during penetration. What you're describing is a challenge that many couples face and is a very common issue in the couples therapy space. And while it can feel discouraging at times, it's also an opportunity to redefine intimacy and connection in ways that may surprise you. Firstly, let's acknowledge the emotional layer here. because pain during penetration, whether it's physical or rooted in other factors, can sometimes lead to feelings of frustration, guilt, or even shame for both partners. So it's important to remember that this isn't anyone's fault. Pain during sex is a real and valid experience, and addressing it together can actually bring you closer. I would say that a fulfilling sexual relationship doesn't have to revolve around penetration. There are so many ways to explore intimacy and pleasure that don't rely on it. So, broadening your definition of what counts as sex can open up space for creativity and deeper connection. Think about the moments where you felt most closest to your partner. It's likely not just the physical acts, but the emotional connection, the laughter, trust, and vulnerability that stood out. Now, those same elements can create satisfying and pleasurable experiences without the need for penetration. It's also worth exploring what your partner might need to feel comfortable and supported. Have they had the chance to talk to a medical professional or therapist about what they're experiencing? Because pain during penetration could be linked to a range of physical conditions, such as vaginismus. It's a condition that involves involuntary muscle contractions in the vagina, making penetration painful or difficult. Or it could be endometriosis, or even psychological factors like past trauma or anxiety. So, addressing the underlying causes can often make a huge difference. And seeking support together can show your partner that they're not alone in this. In the meantime, you can also focus on exploring what feels good for both of you. Intimacy can take so many forms, like sensual touch, oral sex, mutual masturbation, or even simply taking the time to cuddle, kiss, and be present with each other. And these experiences are just as valid and can be incredibly fulfilling, especially when approached with curiosity and openness. So, as I always say, and I'll still say this to you, communication is key here. Talking about what feels good, what doesn't, and what you both want to try can help you navigate this together. So be patient with each other and remember that intimacy isn't about reaching a specific goal. It's about the connection that you share. Ultimately, a fulfilling sexual relationship is built on mutual respect, trust, and the willingness to adapt and grow together. And penetration is just one aspect of intimacy. And there are countless ways to deepen your bond and experience pleasure together. So, by working through this as a team, you may find your relationship becomes even stronger and more satisfying than you ever imagined. I hope that answers your question. That's it for today. And before I go, if you have any burning questions you want answered, send them to novoempowercounselling@gmail.com. Let's navigate this journey together, because better relationships start with understanding. I can't wait to hear from you. You've been listening to Ask a Couples Counselor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. This show is produced by Novo Empower Counselling. We provide a range of services, including couples counselling, individual counselling, and online counselling. To find out more, visit our website novoempowercounselling.com.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. To make sure you don't miss an episode of Ask a Couples Counselor, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor, and I'll see you in the next episode.